Welcome to Paskvan Podcasts. Please like, subscribe, and comment. It really helps this channel. Tonight, we are turning off the familiar highway. We're taking a look at that figure, you know the one, waiting just at the edge of the headlights. This exploration is all about the uncanny consistency of a legend that has, well, it's haunted travelers across continents for over a century. We are examining how a simple act of roadside kindness can become this profound encounter with the unknown.
It's an unsettling study, really, when you look at what we've gathered. A study in human fear and in memory. The power of this story, which most people call the Vanishing Hitchhiker, it isn't in some spectacular event.
No.
It's in a sudden, quiet absence. So our objective for you is to understand the structure of this global myth, why it endures so well in the modern age, and what it suggests about the places we all travel through.
Okay, let's unpack this. We're dealing with something that feels universal. It's persistent.
It is.
It's a narrative so structurally sound, it travels across borders, across language barriers, and it never seems to lose its emotional punch. We're investigating the anatomy of an encounter that always leaves the driver questioning, everything, their own reality. The brilliance of this legend, I think, is really in its setup. It's so recognizable. It doesn't matter if you're picturing a horse cart in 1890 or, a sedan on the interstate today.
The scene is almost baked into our collective consciousness.
Right. A quiet road, late at night, you are alone, and you're probably tired, your mind is somewhere else, maybe cycling through the day's anxieties.
Precisely. And the psychology of that moment is absolutely critical. The driver isn't in a state of high alert.
No, quite the opposite.
They're often in a state of cognitive exhaustion, which is the perfect environment for suggestibility. The only protection, the only thing that feels real is that narrow beam of the headlights. It creates this small, temporary bubble of light cutting through what is otherwise just blackness.
It's like tunnel vision.
It is. It restricts your peripheral awareness, and it forces this intense, almost hypnotic focus on the path right in front of you.
And then that fragile solitude is broken. The figure appears.
Right at the edge of the light.
Just standing there, waiting. It's an interruption that's both, ordinary and deeply unsettling at the same time.
Yes. An ordinary hitchhiker would probably wave, step forward, try to get your attention.
But this figure is passive. Expectant, almost.
And that's what triggers the immediate response from the driver. Usually, this is a kind person, a good Samaritan. Their instinct is to stop and help.
And that's the moment the trap is set, narratively speaking.
The whole structure is built on that foundation of common courtesy, which is why the violation of reality that comes later feels so jarring.
So the core is, a traveler offers a ride to a stranger.
The stranger accepts.
And then the passenger disappears. Silently, somewhere between departure and destination.
That's the framework. Simple, elegant, and terrifying.
What makes it so much more powerful than some dramatic, loud haunting? I think it's that middle part, the journey itself.
The shared space.
Yeah. They might have a brief, polite, maybe even awkward conversation about the weather, the distance.
Or more often, it's just shared silence. And that silence actually normalizes the situation. It files it away in the driver's mind as just routine. A quiet passenger.
And that normalcy is essential, isn't it?
Absolutely. The unsettling element is not an attack. It's the sudden quiet abscess.
Right.
If the passenger had struggled or screamed or vanished in a flash of light, the driver would immediately process it as, okay, this is a supernatural event. Undeniable.
But there's no evidence.
None. No sensory evidence of departure, no sound, no change in the car's weight, no door opening. It unsettles through implication. It forces the driver's mind to wrestle with a violation of physics that happened in the most intimate of spaces.
Right.
Right there in the cabin of their vehicle.
It creates this psychological vacuum.
Yes.
The driver is just left there asking, did I imagine that whole thing? Or did something truly impossible just happen right next to me? The lack of drama is what makes it so much worse.
It denies them the certainty of either a hallucination or a spectacle. It just hangs there in that unresolved space.
Which leads us right into the history of this, doesn't it?
It does. Scholars agree the story is ancient in its bones. The structure of offering hospitality to some kind of supernatural being, that's timeless.
But the documented versions we can really study.
Those date back to the advent of reliable long-distance travel. We see them really start popping up in the late 19th and early 20th centuries.
And it's a legend that just adapted so seamlessly as the technology changed.
It's incredible. The fear of the road, the need to travel, the stranger you meet along the way, all of that remained constant. It just traded the creaking axles of a horse-drawn carriage for, the internal combustion engine.
So let's talk about those early European versions. They're rich in detail, right?
They are, and they reflect a time when communities were still quite insulated. The passenger is almost always a pale, quiet young woman.
Dressed in slightly outdated clothes.
Often, yes, somber clothing. She looks distressed, and she almost always asks to be taken to a nearby village, or, very specifically, her family home. The proximity is key. It's a local story.
In these older versions, the driver's role feels almost priestly, like they're helping a soul on the final leg of a spiritual journey.
That's a great way to put it. When the driver arrives, the disappearance has already happened. They knock on the door, and the family confirms it. The girl they describe, she died years ago, near that very road.
The focus there seems to be on an unfinished journey home, a restless soul looking for comfort or closure.
Exactly. It's more about pity and acknowledgement, not pure terror.
Okay, so now let's compare that to the early American versions. They pop up in the 1920s, the 30s.
Tied directly to the explosion of the automobile and the construction of these huge isolated road networks.
The narrative shifts the scene. It moves on to rural highways, interstate connectors, roads near these big municipal cemeteries.
And the American version, interestingly, seems to require physical proof. It aligns with a more, let's say, pragmatic cultural need for evidence.
So the passenger disappears, but they leave something behind.
A tangible anchor.
Yeah.
A coat, a scarf, maybe a piece of jewelry. This object is what forces the devastating confirmation. The driver seeks out the address. They present the item.
And the family recognizes it.
They recognize it as belonging to someone long dead. Sometimes it's an item they were even buried with.
That is so much more jarring for the driver. It takes the experience from a weird memory to a concrete interaction with something. Something from the other side.
That specific piece of evidence, the coat, that's what haunts the driver. It confirms the reality of the presence and the impossibility of the absence.
The setting itself is so important here. The rise of speed, of isolation, it changed travel forever.
We moved from roads connecting towns to highways that deliberately cut through the landscape, bypassing settled areas.
Which makes them lonelier.
Much lonelier. And the legend anchors itself to that specific local geography. A particular curve, a known cemetery, a house with the distinct mailbox. It makes the unbelievable feel immediate and plausible to anyone who's ever driven that same stretch of asphalt.
Which brings us to the psychological weight of the road itself. Folklorists describe roads as quintessential liminal spaces. Let's break that down. It's not just about being neither here nor there.
The deeper meaning of liminality here is about a state of temporary suspension. On a long road trip, you are socially and psychologically suspended. You're anonymous.
Right, you're just another car.
Exactly. You have no fixed identity other than traveler. You are always moving toward or away from something. This lack of a fixed social or physical identity creates the perfect canvas for folklore.
Especially for figures like the hitchhiker, who is herself permanently suspended between life and death.
It's a perfect match. And when you layer night driving onto that liminal state, the driver's vulnerability just skyrockets.
Because night driving is a deliberate limitation of your senses. Beyond the headlights, there's just nothing. Potential.
Right.
And your imagination fills that void with anxiety.
And we have to remember, travel carries intense emotional weight. People don't often go on long solo night drives when they're calm and centered.
No, you're running from something or to something. You're exhausted, anxious, maybe you're grieving.
That fragile, receptive mental state means that an ordinary flicker of light or a shadow you misinterpret can take on this immense, sometimes spiritual significance. The traveler is already psychologically primed for something beyond the mundane.
So the Vanishing Hitchhiker exploits this perfect storm, the physical isolation of the road and the psychological vulnerability of the tired mind.
It doesn't need special effects. It uses the fundamental tension of being alone in the dark and then confronting a silent, immobile figure who just momentarily steps out of the unknown and into your little corridor of awareness.
And that's why it endures. It's a simple, elegant way for us to process our fears. Fears about anonymity, speed, and the sudden random intrusion of loss into our predictable lives. So moving from the setting to the character herself. What's so striking about the descriptions is the deliberate lack of character. This figure isn't charismatic or menacing. They're just reserved.
Their demeanor, that cold, distant quality, is so effective for the narrative. The passenger is polite but reserved. Their answers are brief, clipped, maybe they just nod.
Right.
This keeps the driver focused on their primary task driving. It prevents the kind of deep conversation or sustained eye contact that would really solidify the passenger's living presence in the driver's mind. They remain psychologically distant.
And that subtle detail about their voice, I find that so powerful. It's often described as being soft, quiet, hard to hear over the road noise.
Yes. That allows the driver to fill in the silence with their own thoughts. It further isolates the driver inside their own head, even with someone sitting right there.
The physical appearance also reinforces this unsettling distance. The clothing is old-fashioned.
But, and this is crucial, not theatrically so. It's not like they're wearing a dusty costume from a play.
No, it's subtler.
It's just enough to feel slightly out of place.
Oh.
A styled dress, a type of coat, a hairstyle that just registers as belonging to another era, maybe 10 or 20 years ago.
And that detail works on a totally subconscious level at first.
Completely. The driver just files it away as eccentric or maybe just a bit out of style. It doesn't scream ghost.
But it becomes the definitive clue later on. It allows their memory to retroactively justify the strangeness once the disappearance happens.
And even with this aloofness, the hitchhiker always names a destination that is hyper-specific.
It's never vague.
Never. It's a particular house number, a named street in a small town, a landmark like a rural crossroads or a cemetery gate. This specificity is what anchors the extraordinary event to a verifiable, real-world geography.
That anchoring serves two vital purposes, doesn't it? First, it gives the driver a concrete task, a rational reason for this whole interaction.
Right. I'm taking this person to 123 Main Street.
And second, more importantly for the story, it provides the exact coordinates for the driver to go back and seek confirmation later. The purpose of the ride feels real, even if the passenger feels ethereal.
Absolutely. The tension builds because the driver is performing this mundane, real-world act, driving a defined route to a known place, with a passenger whose very presence violated that reality.
Then we get to the moment of disappearance. It's the climax, but it's performed with almost no fanfare.
It is always sudden, and it's always quiet. No sound, no physical sensation. The driver realizes the absence when they turn to speak or to point out the destination, and the seat is just empty.
The silence is the narrative weapon.
It is. The event happens when they're slowing down for a stoplight or after a sharp turn that required their full focus, or, most commonly, right as they pull up to the requested address.
And the driver's immediate reaction is to trust their senses, which tell them the car is still locked and they definitely didn't stop long enough for someone to get out.
Which immediately triggers that powerful sequence of emotional aftermath, the thing that defines the witness's trauma.
Stage one is just confusion.
Yes, the initial frantic attempt to rationalize, they must have slipped out. I was so focused on driving, I just didn't notice the door.
But that explanation falls apart pretty quickly.
Which leads right into stage two.
Yeah.
Fear. The fear sets in when the rationalizations fail. The doors were locked, windows were up, the car never fully stopped. The realization that the laws of physics were violated in a completely contained space, that is deeply terrifying.
You'd start to doubt your own senses, your own competence.
And then comes the real psychological weight, which is guilt. The driver questions if they hallucinated the whole thing. Did their exhaustion cause a catastrophic failure of perception? The mind scrambles for any rational way out.
But the unease, the thing that sticks with them, isn't from being harmed, it's from being unable to help. They feel like they failed a lost soul, leaving the encounter unresolved.
That unresolved feeling is what forces them to seek external validation. The narrative demands closure.
So in the classic versions, the driver takes that desperate step. They go back to the house maybe hours later and try to explain this bizarre event to whoever lives there.
This is the moment it transitions from a personal psychological event to a shared, terrifying reality.
And the final disclosure is the story's anchor point. The person they picked up, they died. Years, sometimes decades ago, often in a tragic event linked to that very road.
The confirmation elements are strategically placed to just dismantle any remaining doubt. The family might show a faded photograph, and it's an undeniable match for the quiet stranger.
Or even more devastatingly,
they retrieve the physical item that was left behind, the coat that was buried with the deceased, or the scarf that's been kept as a treasured relic.
That physical proof, it's like a psychological trapdoor.
It is. It confirms the event was real, that the driver wasn't delirious, but that the person involved was not. Well, not from this side of life. The implication is stark. You gave a ride to a ghost, and the road holds on to the spirits of those who met their end there.
The credibility of this whole legend hinges entirely on how it's told.
Absolutely. It doesn't spread through sensational media reports. It spreads through quiet, intimate telling.
And it's always attributed to someone trustworthy, right?
Yeah.
Sensible, sober, familiar with the area. It's never the town drunk who tells the story.
It's the local police officer, the reliable long-haul trucker, the respected doctor driving home from a late call.
And that framing elevates it. It moves it from just a campfire tale to something that feels like a validated experience.
Yeah.
It happened to a sensible person just like you.
Which lowers the listener's psychological defenses. And then the story's smooth adaptation to local geography, mentioning a specific mile marker, an infamous curve, that reinforces the feeling of immediate plausibility. It makes the legend feel like a warning rooted in the very ground beneath your own tires.
The lingering message is profound. Even our most routine acts of kindness can open a door to history and to mystery.
And the witness is left with this burden of knowledge, the certainty that their encounter was real, and the complete impossibility of explaining how it happened.
Okay, the true measure of this legend's power, for me, is its adaptability.
Its ability to translate.
Yes, it crosses continents, it maintains its core architecture, but it effortlessly adapts to local fears, local technologies, local geographies.
That structural integrity is astonishing.
Yeah.
The three pillars, the liminal space, the quiet presence, the sudden absence, they're flexible enough to carry any cultural weight, whether the focus is on morality, ancestral duty, or just a simple tragic accident.
So in the United States, we have to start with Resurrection Mary.
The most famous urban iteration, for sure.
Anchored firmly to Archer Avenue and Resurrection Cemetery in Chicago. She's the perfect modern template for this legend in an industrial age.
Mary really emerges strongly in the 1930s, and she reflects the specific anxieties of that era. Increased automobile speed, the anonymity of a growing city.
She's described as quiet, polite, and dressed in an old-fashioned white gown or a dance dress.
Which is a clear reference to a life cut short on a night that was supposed to be about celebration and leisure.
And she asks for a ride north, toward the city, which suggests this enduring, unfulfilled desire for the life and connection she never got to have.
Right, and the local narrative always explains that she died years earlier, often struck by a vehicle near the cemetery right after leaving a dance hall.
It became a huge piece of lore in the Polish-American communities on the south side of Chicago.
It wasn't just a ghost story. It was a cautionary tale wrapped around a specific cultural context. Young, working-class people who were finally achieving mobility and independence.
Which could be violently taken away by the new forces of speed and distance that the car represented. The road is established as this perpetual danger zone.
And the Resurrection Mary accounts are so localized. Drivers often claim that after she vanishes, they see singed or frosty handprints on the car door, specifically the passenger side.
It anchors the event physically to the vehicle itself.
It does. It solidifies this idea that the road, the car, and the cemetery are 3 points in a triangle of enduring tragedy.
Okay, so let's shift across the Atlantic. The European variants often have a much stronger, a moral or religious tone?
A much stronger one, yes. It reflects these deeper, older historical connections to the land and to establish sacred grounds. These incidents often happen near churchyards, old crossroads, or sites historically linked to unhallowed burial.
So the fence might be dressed in heavy mourning clothes, maybe holding a religious object like a candle or a rosary.
And the journey itself often ends at a church or a rectory, a home near consecrated ground. It underscores the spiritual necessity of the hitchhiker's journey.
A key element in these European tales is the explicit delivery of a warning.
Yes. The hitchhiker's quiet reserve might break just before they disappear. They'll urge the driver, slow down, beware the bend in the road, or do not travel this way on certain holy days.
So the figure here isn't just looking for a ride.
No, they are a restless soul, bound to the road by an unfinished or tragic end. A fatal accident, perhaps, or a death without proper rites. The warning transforms the encounter into an active piece of community folklore.
It reinforces local norms and cautions against recklessness.
It's a very effective mechanism for social control, really, using fear to regulate behavior on dangerous roads.
That cautionary aspect gets amplified even more in Latin American variants, right? Especially along dangerous mountain passes or desert highways.
Significantly amplified, yes, in places where the risks of travel are naturally elevated. The figure known as La Chica de la Curva, the girl of the curve, is a perfect example.
In these high-risk areas, the warning is immediate and practical.
La Chica de la Curva often appears specifically to drivers who are speeding or driving carelessly on these precarious routes, and she urges them, sometimes frantically, to slow down.
And if they ignore her?
The consequence is often immediate and dramatic. She vanishes, and then maybe there's a near-fatal skid or, tragically, a catastrophic accident that the driver just barely avoids.
The legend binds her own individual tragedy, her death on that curve to collective safety.
She serves a dual function. She is the victim of the road, memorializing the past danger, and she's the protector, actively trying to prevent future casualties. The legend becomes an essential part of road safety folklore in regions where the terrain makes high speeds so treacherous.
It's a story designed to save lives by activating a deep spiritual terror.
Then you have the Asian variants, which introduce a completely different emotional framework.
This is more about duty and reverence than terror.
Exactly. In places like Japan or China, the passenger might be seen as an ancestral spirit returning home, especially during festivals that honor the deceased, like Obon or the Ghost Festival.
In those stories, the disappearance is often described as solemn, maybe even wistful, not shocking.
The encounter is interpreted not as a haunting, but as a recognition that the boundary between the living and the dead is thin, especially during these ritual periods. The driver isn't a victim. They are a necessary helper in the ancestor's journey.
And the spirit might leave behind an object associated with ritual, paper money, a flower, incense.
Something that confirms their true nature. The story reinforces a deep cultural respect for the dead and the importance of family connection, even after life ends. The driver is rewarded with the honor of having helped an ancestor, not burdened by fear.
So despite all these cultural differences, these core elements they always show up.
They do. First, the crucial moment of revelation, that the hitchhiker is already dead. That only comes after the disappearance. The delayed confirmation is necessary to first establish the reality of the ride.
Second, the encounter is defined by its subtlety. The impossible happens through an ordinary act of kindness.
Third, a warning is always delivered, whether it's explicit like slow down or implied, the simple realization that the passenger needed a ride back to the very place where they died.
And fourth, the end is always just, sudden emptiness. The driver is left alone, suspended in uncertainty, holding the emotional weight of this shared impossible journey.
And that's why it persists. It speaks to universal human experiences. Vulnerability, the fear of sudden loss, and that poignant hope that death isn't really a final severance.
Okay, let's delve deeper into the psychological reality of this, because the accounts consistently show that the person experiencing this is not initially looking for a ghost.
Not at all.
They spend a huge amount of effort trying to resolve it rationally. The legend's power really activates in that delayed realization, maybe hours or days later.
That delay is critical. Witnesses describe the initial event as profoundly confusing, not immediately frightening. It was a normal interaction, a shared silence, a slight shift of weight in the seat that only becomes terrifying in retrospect.
After the absence is noticed and the mind begins that frantic, desperate search for an explanation that doesn't involve breaking the laws of reality.
And this search is conducted under highly compromised conditions. We know human memory, especially under fatigue, surprise, the stress of driving alone at night.
Yeah.
It's notoriously reconstructive.
It is not a recording.
No. The brain fills in the informational gaps with emotion and expectation.
And night driving is just inherently conducive to misinterpretation.
We know that fatigue impairs the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for critical thinking, for filtering ambiguous stimuli. The limited visual cues from the headlights just make it worse. The brain strains to interpret peripheral shadows.
Yeah. So a brief, indistinct glimpse of a stationary figure can be mentally solidified into a detailed memory of specific clothing or a distinct posture.
And this isn't deception. It's the mind trying to complete the narrative, to make sense of incomplete data.
This is where the power of narrative reinforcement really takes hold. If a driver has already heard the legend, and globally almost everyone has some version of it in their head, their brain interprets ambiguous events through that established framework.
The ambiguous shadow, the person standing in the gloom, now fits a recognizable, known pattern.
It's classic confirmation bias.
Absolutely. The brain prefers an unsettling but coherent narrative over a chaotic lack of meaning. Once that pattern is imposed, memory begins to reinforce the belief. Details that were initially hazy, the cut of the coat, the tone of the voice, they become concrete through emotional recounting and repetition. The folklore itself structures the memory of the event.
And the final nail in the coffin of skepticism is that terrifying moment of coincidence.
The proof.
The driver, trying to rationalize, investigates the address or checks local history, and they discover a death that lines up perfectly with the road, the destination, or the passenger's description.
A newspaper clipping from the 1940s, a memorial plaque on the side of the road, a conversation with an old local.
The timing feels so meaningful, and the human brain is hardwired to find patterns, so the alignment feels like absolute confirmation, not just a chance correlation.
The ambiguity is resolved by external evidence. The personal weird event transforms into a verified encounter with the legend. It becomes anchored in narrative discovery.
Folklorists argue these legends persist not because they're literally factual, but because they are emotionally accurate.
Yes, they express these deep shared anxieties and regrets about vulnerability and loss in our high-speed world.
The legend is fundamentally about unfinished journeys.
It's about lives cut short, destinations never reached, and the immense injustice of sudden random loss. The hitchhiker is almost always young or otherwise vulnerable, which just intensifies the driver's feeling of injustice and their inability to provide salvation.
The figure is liminal, existing between states, just like the road itself.
And the story is rarely malevolent. It isn't about vengeance. It's a moral reminder to pay attention, to recognize the fragility of life, and to acknowledge the history of the ground beneath us.
The guilt the driver feels, that failure to provide complete help, it mirrors real-world grief, that struggle we all have to find meaning after a senseless loss.
The hitchhiker acts as a proxy for our unacknowledged communal grief over all those lost on the asphalt.
And this myth hasn't faded at all. It's adapted seamlessly into the digital age.
Modern media, films, TV, online forums, they constantly reintroduce and reinforce the core structure.
And technology doesn't defeat the legend. It just gives it new language.
Right. When we look at modern accounts, the setting updates to ride-sharing services. Drivers report passengers vanishing from the back seat, only to find the app registers a successful drop-off.
Or dashcam footage shows doors opening and closing, but with no visible figure getting out.
The mystery shifts from physical geography, cemetery, the crossroads, to digital data integrity. The question is no longer, did I stop the car? It's, how did the GPS tracker log the completion of the ride if the passenger was never there?
The absence is now a digital anomaly, a discrepancy in timestamps and ride records.
Technology cannot fully illuminate the space of uncertainty the story occupies. Instead, it provides new, frustrating ways for the evidence to conflict. The fear remains the same.
That sudden realization that a known controlled space, your car, the app's digital record, has been quietly violated by an unknown presence.
The enduring purpose of The Vanishing Hitchhiker is to hold up that mirror of ambiguity. It's about an act of kindness, opening a door to something unresolvable.
The story doesn't demand that you believe in ghosts. It just asks you to consider how easily your own certainty can dissolve under the right conditions of fatigue, darkness, and emotional stress.
The true power, ultimately, relies on your recognition of that. Everyone has driven alone at night. Everyone has wondered about that stranger they saw by the roadside. This story takes that universal, fleeting curiosity and solidifies it into a narrative that demands to be remembered. #hey outro. So what we've learned is that the legend thrives precisely because it occupies that fragile space between skepticism and wonder. It transforms a simple, decent act offering someone a ride into a confrontation with the fundamental uncertainty of existence. It asks us to look at the anonymity of the highway and recognize that these roads are just. They're saturated with history and grief. It reminds us they remember those who never arrived at their destination.
And the story is structurally designed to never really resolve. It wants to be carried forward, to be shared.
It has to.
It adapts to every new technology, every new stretch of pavement, because that emotional core loss, kindness, and sudden absence, it stays perfectly constant. The essential question is not if the encounter is real in the literal sense, but why we, as travelers who prioritize speed and efficiency, continue to need this reminder of vulnerability.
If you connect this to the broader psychological landscape, The Vanishing Hitchhiker isn't a monster. It's not a menace. It's a profound messenger.
The personification of the journey cut short.
Exactly. Asking for acknowledgement of loss, not for fear.
Which raises an important question for you, the listener, the next time you are alone on a stretch of dark highway. If you offered a stranger help and they disappeared before their arrival, would your deepest concern be that they were a spirit from the past? Or that the experience was merely a terrible consequence of your own exhaustion and the reconstructive nature of memory? The road never forgets, And neither do the stories we tell about the quiet figures who haunt its edges.